Welcome back, folks, to WrestleRant, where I give my in-depth analysis of all the pay-per-views that I watched in the WWE Network. For the entire road to WrestleMania, I'll be talking about every past WrestleMania, from 1 through 30, with the exception of 17, 19, 20, and 21, which have already been reviewed here on the channel as of last spring, if you want to go back and check those out. Reviews of WrestleMania 1 through 4 are already here on the channel from the last couple of weeks, so go back and check those out as well. So that being said, today I'll be talking about WrestleMania 5, not one of my more favorite WrestleManias to go back and watch on the network. Of all the WrestleManias that I've watched so far, and I mean, you go back and watch 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and a lot of the early WrestleManias, a lot of them featured a lot of inconsequential matches and disqualification finishes and countout finishes, double countouts, double DQs, and stuff like that. If you're a fan of the 80s, I'm a fan of the 80s. I love it. I love the decade of the 80s in music, in movies, and in wrestling. But the early WrestleManias are really all about the big matches, and you can make an argument that they are about that today. But there's just so many matches compared to today. The last WrestleMania that I reviewed, WrestleMania 4, had 16 matches on the card. This one has 14 on it. So a lot of matches, many of the matches on these cards don't really mean anything, but I'll give the results and I'll just talk about the ones that kind of stood out to me as being really good. That's kind of what I'm going to be doing with a lot of the early WrestleManias before we get into the more storyline-driven WrestleManias where every match served a purpose, and that's not really around WrestleMania 10, 11 onwards. So kicking off this show, Hercules defeating King Haku. Fine matchup, and really nothing to say there. Twin Towers defeating the Rockers, of course, consisting of Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty, one of the more underrated tag teams of all time, in my opinion. One of the tag teams that never got a tag team title run. I thought the loss of the Rockers would lead to a breakup, a split. I thought they were teasing tension, but this was only 1989, so they still had a couple more years before they would part ways. But still, though, nice to see, the early formation of Mr. WrestleMania, Shawn Michaels, compete in a good matchup. As I've said in all my past WrestleManias, it's usually the tag team matches that steal the show at these WrestleManias, early on anyway, and I thought this was a really good matchup. Would have preferred the Rockers to go over, especially since they wouldn't split for a couple more years, but still a good match nevertheless. Up next, Brutus Beefcake, not the Barber just yet, taking on Ted DiBiase. Match went to a double countout. It was a really good matchup. I was not a fan of Brutus Beefcake. I never really thought he was anything great. I thought he felt out of place in the IC title match the year before at WrestleMania 4. It's really not even in the early WrestleManias. You go through WrestleManias 1 through 30, there's always that one guy. There's always that one guy. Miz sticks out to my mind, just in recent years, that goes from main eventing the pay-per-view, that, main events WrestleMania, to kicking off the show or being in one of the early matches the very next year. Ted DiBiase is that guy for WrestleMania 4 and 5, as he went from the main event, nearly winning the WWE title against Macho Man Randy Savage, to facing Brutus Beefcake on this show, in a match that didn't even have a finish. It was a good match, don't get me wrong, but really wasn't anything really to it, aside from these two have a problem with each other, a good matchup, both were good workers. I mean, Beefcake, although I didn't really care for his gimmick, the barber shit, didn't really care for it, or the stupid name, he was a good worker, and they had a decent matchup, really nothing that was all too notable. The Bushwhackers defeating the fabulous Rougeau brothers. Another good tag team match, but nothing that blew me away. Mr. Perfect defeating the Blue Blazer. Mr. Perfect, I think this was his WrestleMania debut, and of course, also the WrestleMania debut of the Blue Blazer, a.k.a. Owen Hart. So, of course, he would go on to have many notable matches, many memorable matches at WrestleMania over the next couple of years. So, it wasn't really like a great match, but it was cool to see, pretty interesting, and fun to see these two in the early developments of their respective characters, Perfect and Owen Hart, respectively. Demolition defeating the Powers of Pain to retain their tag team titles in a hardcore match. Or not a hardcore match, I'm sorry, the handicap match. It was Axe and Smash against the Powers of Pain, the Warlord and the Barbarian, and Mr. Fuji with the Powers of Pain. But even then, Demolition was still able to overcome the odds and retain their tag team titles. So a nice little twist on that in the handicap stipulation, something that you didn't really ordinarily see in the early WrestleManias. You would only see singles matches, tag team matches, and that's pretty much it. So the first handicap matchup, I believe, in WrestleMania history comes at WrestleMania 5 in the form of this matchup. Up next, Dino Bravo defeating Ronnie Garvin. Throwaway matchup. Dino Bravo, I thought, was really good. Not really one of the more talked about characters all these years later, but you go back and watch these early WrestleManias 1 through 5 and the early SummerSlams too, in which I've watched, in Survivor Series. The guy was really talented. I don't think he gets the credit he deserves more often than not, but pretty much a squash match there. The Brainbusters defeating Strikeforce, another really good tag team matchup. Like I said, the tag team matches always steal the show at these WrestleManias, so really no exception with these matches on WrestleMania 5. Up next, Jake the Snake Roberts taking on Andre the Giant, with Big John Studd as the special guest referee. So a pretty interesting match here. Bobby Heenan also in the corner of Andre the Giant. So good stuff here. I thought this was good. I mean, Andre the Giant didn't have many show-stealing performances at WrestleMania, obviously, but the guy was a spectacle. He was an attraction. And I thought Jake the Snake Roberts was one of the more underrated performers in WrestleMania and WWE history. Of course, never having won the World Championship, the WWE title, will always go down as one of the greatest superstars, in my opinion, to have never won a World Championship in WWE. But good matchup, though. I mean, got as good of a matchup as you possibly can out of Andre. Like I've said before, not even in terms of WrestleMania, and I know this was par for the course back in the 80s, but I hate to see a match go 9-10 minutes or go for a lengthy period of time. And 9 and 10 minutes was kind of long for a match back in the 80s and, in the early WrestleManias, and then end in a disqualification. I understand they wanted to protect Andre, but I don't know, I just felt really out of place for me. And Big John Studd was an interesting factor as well as the special guest referee. Up next, the Hart Foundation defeating the Honky Tonk Man and Greg Valentine in tag team action. So, of course, we would get a sneak peek once again of the early WrestleMania matches of Bret the Hitman Hart. So, another good matchup there. Rick Rude defeating the Ultimate Warrior to win the WWE Intercontinental Championship. So, the match I thought was not amazing or anything, but I thought it was pretty good. Rick Rude has always been very underrated to me. I mean, I know I've said that a million times already in this video alone, but I always thought that he, maybe not World Championship material, but deserved a lot more. Not in the WWE Hall of Fame as of right now, and I think he deserves to be. I think he was a great talent, very charismatic. I always laugh watching him, watching him back on the WWE Network and all these WrestleManias, because the guy had a great gimmick with the spray painted tights and stuff like that. I always thought he was awesome. But really good matchup here, and one of the rare losses for the Ultimate Warrior in WWE. And I remember watching the Ultimate Warrior's, not the documentary on the network, or that too, but the DVD that they put out for him about a year ago, and I have that on DVD. I'm sitting right next to it right now. And all the matches, it was a collection of his best matches over the course of his WWE and over the course of his pro wrestling career. And then he won almost every single matchup that he had on this DVD. And I went back and looked it up, and I was thinking to myself, I think I tweeted it out at the time too, in that does Ultimate Warrior have the best win-loss record in WWE history? And I think he does. And this was one of the rare losses that he had in his career, and it came at WrestleMania against Rick Rude, in which he dropped the IC Championship. And of course, he would go on to regain it a little bit later, going into WrestleMania 6 as Intercontinental Champion to face WWE Champion at the time, Hulk Hogan, which I'll get to in my WrestleMania 6 review. But a really good match from Rick Rude and Ultimate Warrior. Jim Duggan versus Bad News Brown, ending in a double disqualification. Random throwaway matchup, only went 4 minutes. Bad News Brown, I guess they really saw something in him. He would go on to, the previous year he won that Battle Royal to kick off the show. This year he's third to last in the card. Really never amounted to anything. I thought he was a good character, going back and watching footage of him on the network and on YouTube and stuff like that. I thought he was a good character, but nothing too special in which I thought he deserved a main event slot or anything. But that was a random throwaway match of the Red Rooster defeating Bobby Heenan. I forgot what his name was. That was Triple H's buddy that was on his documentary, and he dressed up as a Red Rooster, had that stupid-ass gimmick. His name escapes me right now. But that matchup went only 30 seconds. Bobby Heenan in action, which I thought was fun the previous year. But this was a random throwaway matchup. And to have it right before the main event, too, I thought was kind of out of place. I know it was a nice comedic relief, a nice, little filler, but to have it right before the main event kind of felt out of place to me anyway. So that was stupid. As much as I love Bobby Heenan, I just thought that was kind of random and dumb. But that was that. And then we get to the main event for the WWE Championship, the most memorable matchup, needless to say, on this show, between Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage. The implosion of the Mega Powers, Savage and Hogan, with Miss Elizabeth torn between the two after Randy Savage turned heel in February. I'm recording this on the 4th. He actually turned heel on the 3rd, as I learned on my This Day in WWE History calendar, my Rip-Out calendar, and it said that on there back in, 35 years ago, or 26 years ago as of yesterday when I record this, so that was pretty cool. But, a really good matchup from Hogan and Savage, one of the better WrestleMania matches, in my opinion, for Hulk Hogan. Probably the best one that he's had up to this point. I know his match with Andre is, of course, more memorable for the body slam alone, But I thought his match with Savage was the best WrestleMania matchup up to this point, if not ever. I'm trying to think of a better WrestleMania match that Hulk Hogan had. Maybe the one with The Rock at WrestleMania 18. I'll get to that when I get to it, when I review WrestleMania 18 in a couple more weeks. But that really should come as no surprise. I mean, Savage carried him to a very good matchup, and Hulk Hogan wasn't terrible, but he was not very good in the ring, and Savage, of course, pulled him to a very good matchup. Got a lot of great time, so I appreciated that. Told a great story with Savage being jealous over Hulk Hogan, not really flirting, but always being with Miss Elizabeth, and the history there with the tag team and everything else, kind of dating back to the previous year's WrestleMania, the very same event where Randy Savage won that championship to begin with. So I told a great story. I thought the match was very, very good. Hulk Hogan, of course, predictably enough, coming up victorious as the new WWE champion to kick off, I think, his second reign with the WWE title. So that was a predictable finish, but I thought it was a great main event, though, and that was pretty much, I don't want to say the only good match on this show. I thought it was obviously the best match on the show. But WrestleMania 5 really is not worth your time going back to watching the network. Of all the WrestleManias that I reviewed so far, I don't know if I would call this the weakest. It's definitely up there, though. The undercard was just really random, thrown together. Not as bad as the previous year's WrestleMania with all the tournament matches, but none of them really packed a punch, and as you can kind of tell from my review, I didn't really talk about most of them because a lot of them didn't really matter. It was cool to see Mr. Perfect and Owen Hart make their WrestleMania debuts, to see Jake Roberts and Andre, they had a good story. Rick Rude and Warrior I enjoyed, and then the main event, but 3 out of 14 matches really isn't saying much. So there's really no need for you to go back and watch this WrestleMania in its entirety. You're not missing much, but I mixed my words there. If there is one match from this WrestleMania that you should go back and watch on the network, it is Hulk Hogan versus Savage. Thought it was a great match, told a great story, and like I said before, needless to say, the best matchup the entire show. So I'll be back in a couple more days on Tuesday with my review of WrestleMania 6, which of course is headlined by Ultimate Warrior versus Hulk Hogan for the WWE Championship, so that should be interesting. But in the meantime, in the between time, you guys can find me on Twitter at WrestleRant, on Facebook at Graham Jason Matthews. Make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. All support is greatly appreciated. Thanks again for watching, listening. Really does mean a lot to me. Like I said before, I'll catch you guys in my next video with my WrestleMania 6 review. Catch you guys then.